Hello and welcome back to Talk About Strange. We're on part 2 of a run of stories that I'm trying to pump out here. I've fallen behind, and I just got done in this last video talking about how I just had this crazy strange week. We had a storm. Our power was out, so we were out of power for, geez, I think technically 4 days and 3 nights. So that was pretty rough. So the last story I did was a bit chaotic because the contributor, I think, just was quite terrified from the situation, and so it came out in the writing, and so it's just really hard for me to read through that. So what I want to do, because I want to get that story out, I know it's important to her, I'm going to read what I can read of that story, what happened to her, you know, who she is and what it's about, stuff like that. And then I'm just going to ad-lib the story in so that you get the gist. Like, I've read the story about 3 or 4 times now trying to tell it. So, you know, she's frightened, and it just comes out in a way that I just can't read it in the way that she, you know, wrote it. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying she's frightened, and it was, you know, you got to go through these stories and before you send them, kind of read them, maybe just read them out loud, so you can hear how it reads back. If you just read it if you type it in your mind, in your head, and then you read it in your head, your mind will autocorrect. If you read it out loud, that will, you know, help you translate it, you know, through, because I got to read it out loud. So let's get on with that, and because I do want to share this with you. And apparently she's had a lot of situations. Hello, my name is Rhonda. I've been watching your channel now for a while, and I did write you an email, but I think it got overlooked somehow. I figured it was pretty important to share. Back in the early 90s, Cranbrook, BC, I had to move to a place called Trask Trailer Court because I was in an abusive situation, and I got an opportunity to buy my own trailer. There was an old flood trailer. It's about 12 miles out of town. I didn't mind living there. It was beautiful, close to Maury Lake. I was just a stone's throw from where my brother lived in Maury Lake. So I thought we could rekindle some old childhood memories, go hunting and fishing together, because his wife didn't care for either. And I love hunting and fishing. But due to what I witnessed, I'm very leery about going into the woods, even though I'm 12 miles. I was actually in the woods because I live in the woods, 12 miles out of town. My next door neighbor, and this is where I'm going to start, so ad-libbing this the best I can, I hope you don't mind. So my neighbor Kathleen was out to the bar. She went drinking, and she had drank too much and left her car to be safe, which is the right thing to do, and then asked me if I could give her a ride in to town the next day and follow her back and have an extra vehicle to come back, or give her a ride to town and follow her back. On the way in, I seen a dead goat on the side of the road. It was freezing out. So on the way back, I told her I would, as long as on the way back she didn't lose me or she had to wait for me, because sometimes my car would stall on its own, and I didn't know what was wrong with it, but there was something wrong with it. It would do that. I didn't want to be caught out in 30 below weather while you were sitting, you know, out helping her out. She's sitting home on the couch, nice and warm. So on the way back, there's a curb in the road where that dead goat was sitting in the road, and I stayed back from her because she's kind of an erratic driver, and so I stayed back a ways, and I seen her brake lights come on. She slowed down, and I was getting close to her. Then all of a sudden she took off, leaving me in the dust. So I was really concerned about why she left me behind, and thought, what, is she crazy? I'm here helping her. She's leaving me behind like I told her not to do. And that was near where that goat was. So as I'm getting closer, I realized that looks like somebody standing on the side of the road, partially in the road, bent over. And so I slowed down so as not to hit the person. As I got closer, I realized this was a huge person, looked like they were naked, and I could see the skin and that. So I rolled down my window to see if they were okay, to find out what was going on. And I got up to where I was probably only 6 foot away. When I got that close, I realized that this was no person. And it stood up and turned around and looked at me. And it wasn't a dog, but it wasn't a person. It was huge, 8, 9 foot tall, and had a long snout like a dog, about over a foot long, and hind quarters almost like a dog. And I didn't see the front because the feet were down in snow, covered in bloody snow from eating that carcass. It was there eating that goat. Which at that point I just sat there and stared at it in panic, because I was panicked or trying to figure out what was going on. But when I finally snapped out of it, I gunned it and took off and chased back after my neighbor that had left me behind. And I caught up with her fast. She pulled into the trailer park first. As I pulled in, I came in so fast that I actually clipped the back of her car, spun her sideways, and she got control and parked back in her parking spot. And then I parked in my parking spot. I got out and asked her why the hell she left me behind, and if she's seen what I seen, and she didn't want to talk about it. She's terrified. She says, "I don't want to talk about it. Just go home. Leave me alone." I said, "Well, you got to talk about it. You've seen it. I know you've seen it. I seen it, and you left me behind. I was there to help you, and now you don't want to talk about it." So she said, "I don't want to talk about it." She went inside. So I told her, "Well, at least write it down. Write it down so I know that we've seen the same thing." So the next day, I got back in touch with her. She really didn't want to talk about it, but she calmed down enough after a while that we did talk about it a little bit, but she still wouldn't go into details. So I was just left alone, feeling like, questioning if I was crazy, if I'd really seen it, or if it was a dream, or what was going on. And that's what I was starting to think. But that night, I heard howling, real bad howling. It was loud, and outside the trailer. And I remembered that the bottom of the trailer wasn't buckled in. I didn't close it all the way. And I hear this thing walking around the trailer, crunching through the ice and the snow. And all of a sudden I heard it crawl underneath the trailer. And I called my friend, told them, her father, I asked them if they could come out, to help me, that get a gun, bring a gun and get out here, because this thing was underneath the trailer. And I felt it start pushing up against the bottom of the floor in the bedroom where I was at. I was hiding in the bedroom with my kids. So I remember the kids had a spike out in the kitchen. I grabbed my hammer. It was a railroad spike, and where the floor was heaving up, I drove it down through the floor. I heard this thing howl, yelp in pain, and it crawled back out from underneath the trailer and took off. About that time, my friend showed up with her father. We tried to track it. We seen blood in the snow, and we tried to track it for a ways out, out where we got the edge of the woods near my satellite dish. And I just had this bad feeling that we shouldn't go any further. And I told them, I said, we better not go any further. And they offered to leave the gun with me. And I said, no, I'm afraid I'll shoot myself or one of my neighbors. And they said they'd come back if I needed it. So anyway, the next day I went back out with my neighbor friend, and we looked into it and followed the trail and called the police and had them come down and look at it. They acted like I was crazy, but then I called the police. They didn't come. They acted like I was crazy. So, and I was afraid to tell them what exactly happened, because I didn't want to get locked up. So my friend and her father came back out, and we looked at the trail, and he's a hunter. And he said he'd never seen prints like that. They had claws and long, over a foot long, with claws, and it wasn't a bear or a small animal. It must have been something big. But anyway, so they went back home, and then it happened, and I had them take my kids with them so they'd be safe, and I stayed alone. And it came back again that night and tried to get in, and I noticed it was trying to open the door. So I took some harness or something. She had a harness, and she tied the door, the back door, and I've seen this in trailers, the back door was adjacent to the bathroom door. So she took a harness and tried to tie the two of them together so it couldn't pull it open. The door was locked, but somehow when tying it, it come unlocked and it started opening. So she's holding the door with everything she has. So it's tied and she's holding it. Her phone rings. It's her friend. She couldn't answer it. She's holding the door. So her friend gets nervous, and her dad come back. Meanwhile, she's fighting back this thing, trying to open the door. And when they pulled up to the trailer, it was enough that it scared the thing away, and it took off. Her friend came in, and from that point, that she had went with her friend back to where her kids were, I think, in that, and stayed with them to stay away from that. So then she went back and she got some friends and got some money together and to move to get out of there, which I don't blame her. And the landlord told her as long as she could find somebody to buy the trailer. And she told some people that she knew, cousins, and they said they would take it. She told them about what happened so they would know. And they said they weren't worried about it because they have guns and they can protect themselves, so they weren't too worried about it. And so they took the place. She packed up everything she could. She threw a lot of stuff away. She left stuff behind. She packed up a U-Haul, and she got out of there. She got her sister to drive for her because she was too scared to drive after what had happened. I don't blame you. Sounds terrifying. She's also had other encounters with, she's seen a spaceship, run-ins with aliens around her house. She's had a lot of stuff happen, and so, you know, she's been through a lot, and so I understand that. I get it. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you sending in this story. I see you got a lot more other stuff here that you went into. If you can, just do me a favor and go through and clarify some of that, just, you know, for me. Just read it through and read it out loud, because I'd love to share your information. Not your information, your story, your encounters. And you just got to, I know you're scared, so just take a breath, slow down, try to type it out, and read it once out loud before you send it to me. And if you can read through it without, you know, too much hesitation, then it'll make it easier for me. But obviously your story is important, and that's why I went ahead and did this, and I hope you don't mind me ad-libbing it for you. But it was just too hard for me to, you know, read it straight through. All right. I'm going to move on to the next one now. And thank you again for sending that in. That was our first werewolf story. I do want more of them, Dogman, Warewolf, and whatnot. So I know there's a lot of stuff out there that happens. What happened here? Okay. What do we got here? Hello, I just found your channel this morning. I've already enjoyed hearing some of your stories. I haven't gotten through them all yet, but I have enjoyed the ones I have listened to. I must admit, even though I have had my own experiences, I still take stories with a grain of salt. But in saying that, I know some of them are very likely true. I heard someone say once that just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it didn't happen. That isn't true. I think that's a good rule of thumb. I actually am a clinical pharmacist. My dad is an engineer, my mom was a nurse, and a lot of my family was either in the medical field or engineering field or served in the military at one time or another. Needless to say, I come from a long line of no-nonsense type folks. I was raised as a Christian and accepted Christ as a child, but in recent years I've really learned what it means to be a true follower of Christ. You can go to church, you can call yourself a Christian, but a true follower of Christ has a relationship with Him, I believe. You spend time with Him in prayer and in His Word, and you seek Him and serve Him, often by serving your fellow man. To me, that's a heart thing. Anyhow, I say all this to set up the background that the circumstances I work in, and people I know don't like these kind of stories, but the truth is the truth. And I don't share this story with just anyone. I just like sharing the gospel. You have to use discernment. Don't throw your pearls before pigs, so to speak. So as you may have guessed, I don't want my name out there for everyone to see, but you can call me Chris. I was born and raised in Athens, Georgia. I lived out in the country, just on the outskirts of Athens, really. I had about 10 acres with horses, dogs, cats. In high school, pet rats and ferrets. That's a story in itself. I was never afraid of the dark or the woods, since we had woods surrounding us. I was always good with animals and pretty tough. We had land behind ours that was pure forest with huge ravines. My country friends and I would often go back in those woods and play as children and leap across the deep ravines that we could make it across. Sometimes we'd make the jump and end up on the side of a steep cliff with pine needles laden in our sides and scramble up. Now I wonder how we even survived, but I also tell all this because I wonder if somehow this has something to do with possibly caused this whole encounter. So our house was 2 stories, and when you went up the stairs, you came to a dead end and you go right or left. My bedroom was on the right, and the 2 upstairs bedrooms shared a bathroom that joined the 2 bedrooms. So when you took the right and went through the door into my bedroom, you could walk a few steps past the bathroom door on the left and look to the left and see the door, 2 bedroom windows. Now, one of those windows didn't have a screen at the time. Much to my dismay, my dad wouldn't allow us to have pets in the house. However, one of our cats by the name of Kitten learned he could climb the myrtle tree, it's a tongue twister, and jump on the roof. I would open the window without the screen and he'd come in for some pets and snuggles. It was a nightly routine, really. So as soon as night fell, I would go to my room to get ready for bed and always look for Kitten's green glowing eyes to pop up in the window. Our little ritual, I suppose. Well, this particular night, I bounded up the stairs. I must have been about 9 years old at the time, and immediately turned to face the window and expected to see my sweet cat's face looking back at me. That was absolutely not what I saw. I saw a terrifying, huge, grotesque face looking back at me. For years after this happened, I suppressed the story and didn't want to talk about it, but the face is still burned in my memory pretty well. I know it looked to my childlike brain like a gorilla, except there was no malice in its eyes that even my child self could see. Its face was much bigger than mine and pressed right up against the window with a kind of snarl look to it. I didn't specifically remember the snarl per se, but just remember it was not a fan of me. I didn't know how long I stood there frozen in fear looking back, but I do know that when people say they see a Sasquatch for the first time, they can't move. I think it is because of your brain trying to process this crazy experience somewhere. I remember being terrified and frozen in fear and just thinking, what the heck is this? And immediately my brain started to try to make sense of it. Like, did an ape escape the zoo? What is it? Finally, I was able to break from the trance I was in, and when I say I ran down the stairs, I mean I ran. Our living room was just at the bottom of the stairs, so my parents knew the second they saw my face something was terribly wrong. I remember them looking at me, and my dad saying, "What is it, hon?" I said something to the effect of, "There's a giant ape facing through my window." My dad said, "It's probably just your reflection," which now makes me laugh out loud, but I said, "No, Dad, no, it's definitely not." And with that, he and my mom bounded straight up the stairs to find nothing there. I was so relieved it was gone, but also disappointed that no one else would believe However, my parents knew I wasn't prone to hysterics and all tall tales. They immediately went outside and let our Rottweilers out of the garage and put a ladder up on the roof to go up and see what they could find out. They found nothing. My dad concluded it was probably one of the neighbor kids that live in the house next door who climbed the roof with a mask on. Even as he explained, I could tell he didn't believe it himself. There's no way they could have gotten up the tree like a cat did just because the branches weren't strong enough to hold them, nor could he have gotten on the roof that quickly and could hear even the cat scampering around on and thud on the roof when he made the jump from the tree to the roof. I never saw that face again. My parents still remember this event and still try to rationally explain what I saw away, but I know what I saw. And want to hear something even stranger? After being married to my husband for many years, I told him about this. and he had the same experience, albeit he was a bit younger, maybe closer to 6 or 7. He thought, and his experience happened at his grandparents' home down in South Georgia, so about 4 hours from where I grew up in Athens. But the same thing, an ape-like face peering to him through a window in the night. The difference is he never told anyone. Strange, I tell you. I wonder if they are from another realm, are fallen angels. I just don't know. Can some be good, some be evil, much like humans? I don't really have any answers, but I do believe with all of my heart that our Heavenly Father protects us from far more scary things than even these. For that, I am so thankful. All right, Chris, thank you for sharing that. That's pretty awesome. Man, you wonder if it was a young Bigfoot, Sabe, teen, looking in on you, and why it only came once. Maybe it was passing through the whole neighborhood. Maybe even been the same one that had been there before. That's something else. Thank you for sharing that. That's cool. All right, let's get on. What else we got here? So that was another Bigfoot peeping Tom. That's what that was. January 6th. I'm pretty new to your channel, but not new to paranormal or Bigfoot. My name is Teresa. I am 66 years young. I grew up in a small coal town in southwest Pennsylvania. There were railroad tracks directly behind our house, across the street, down maybe 20 foot from my house. I had a very, I guess what you might call a normal childhood for those times. We were not rich or even middle class by any means. My mother got married very young and had 4 girls, one after the other, and then 7 years later, she had a boy. Then after another 7 years later, another girl. Whew! Big family. But while I lived in that house, it was just us 4 girls. I slept in a bedroom with my favorite sister, and we had twin beds side by side. My bed was close to the window. There was just a screen in the window separating us from the outside, but we were on the 2nd story. We lived in a duplex that was 2 stories, and on the other side there was a couple with a young boy whose bathroom was right on the side of our bedroom door. There was a chest pushed up against the door so nobody could get in or out. We could hear the neighbor boy splashing and playing in the bathtub with his toys at night. Me and my sister would just giggle. One night we were laying in bed, and it was really hot, so we went out over and opened up. One night we were laying in bed. It was really hot, so we went over to the window to try and get a breeze. A house about 3 down from ours seemed to have a light over it. So we looked up, and you could see a circle object in the sky. We both said UFO. Can't remember how long we watched it, honestly. I just remember it. Another time my sister had gone to the bathroom, and it was on a Saturday night because my parents were playing cards with some of their best friends till around 3 o'clock in the morning. They used to play Pinnacle and drink Pepsi and smoke cigarettes while we laid there listening upstairs. While my sister was in the bathroom, all of a sudden a bright white ball of light slowly drifted past our bedroom window, and it lit up so bright you would think somebody had put a stadium light shining in our window. I became paralyzed with fear. It slowly drifted by, and I couldn't move out of sheer terror, for I didn't know how long. I don't know how long. My sister was taking far too long in the bathroom, so I ran finally and asked if she saw it. The bathroom window had been glazed over so no one could see in, and she didn't see a thing. So I ran down the steps and told my parents what I'd seen, and they laughed and said it was probably the tooth fairy. I was only maybe 9 years old, so I still believed. But I knew darn well it was not a tooth fairy. I went back up to bed, and it took me a long time to fall back to sleep. The next day, on a bulletin board at school, I saw a friend of ours had written an essay and got an A on it, and they hung it on there. so everyone could see. He had written about a ball of light that saw floating around his neighborhood one night. People will try to tell you that it was just gas from a coal mine, but no way was that what I saw. I'm just sharing these stories to show you that I had a strange experience before when I was a child. The most recent one was my camping experience with my son 2 summers ago. At a state park up in the mountains near a ski resort where southwest Pennsylvania, we live in Chestnut Ridge, and it is well known for Bigfoot. The most recent one was my camping experience with my son 2 summers ago at a state park up in the mountains near the ski resort here in southwest Pennsylvania. We live in Chestnut Ridge, and it's well known for Bigfoot sightings and experiences. My son and his fiancée had gone camping in the same spot just 3 months earlier, and one night after they had gone into their tent, they were awakened at 3 a.m. by a very strange and loud owl hooting on one side of the tent, and the other owl would hoot on the other side of the tent. They had a very large tent that slept 12 people. The hooting went on for at least 15 minutes. My son was growing angry because he couldn't sleep with all the racket and was glad when they stopped. After he fell asleep, she laid there and couldn't get back to sleep when she heard something very large lumbering through their campsite past the tent, and she said it sounded like it had asthma. It was the way it was breathing. It was a very guttural sound, she said. They did not believe in Bigfoot. They joked with me about it a lot. Sadly, my son took his life July 3rd. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's terrible. This was one of my best memories in the last few years spending time with them, camping. Man, they surprised me by buying me a tent, and they already had sleeping bags and invited me to go up camping with them on his birthday, present day for my 64th birthday. I had not gone camping in 25 years, but before that, I camped a lot from the time I was around 12 as a vacation every year. Then when I got married to my husband, we camped also on a vacation every summer. Anyway, when we arrived at the camp, the site was down a very steep path that had rocks, but it was doable if you took your time. I had a very bad back, so I had to be really careful. You couldn't see the campground from the road because it was too far down in there, in the woods and around. It was the most secluded campsite in the whole park. The park isn't huge as far as the campground goes, but acres. It is very big, and it's all woods for as far as the eye can see up there. There's only one road that runs through the park, and it was down from the campsite, probably about 200 to 300 feet down the hill. I couldn't see it, but I heard cars whizzing by occasionally. When I got to the bottom of the path, walking down into the campsite, they had a canopy set up on the left, and straight ahead was a blue tent that was mine, and there was a campfire ring right in the bottom of the path. It was huge. Somebody had already built it up with big boulders, and I wondered how anyone could have lifted them. It was the biggest fire ring I'd ever seen. Their tent was to the right down a little path about 30 feet from my tent, so I could see their tent from mine if I had my window open, but I didn't. Behind my tent there were many little saplings that were snapped off, which I found strange. Back to the left in a wooded area, there was one area that was extremely messed up, almost like a tornado went through. There were many snapped off and broken down trees back there, and it actually looked spooky. I decided right away, you know how you get that feeling that something is amiss. I stayed away from the whole time I was there. To the left of our campsite was nothing but a field and trees. Then beyond that was a pet ring where all the campers with pets camped, but there was hardly anybody there. There was no one camped in the sites that I would be able to see if I walked over through those trees. There was a smell of feces over that way, so I assumed it was from the dogs, but pretty sure those people were probably careful to clean up after themselves. The state parks are very strict about leaving anything out of place and any trash laying around now. When you looked up the hill to the road, you couldn't see the road or even a vehicle, but you could hear when it went down. The day I got there was a Monday, so most of the campers were gone for work during the week. My third night camping there, I was awakened around 3 o'clock in the morning by a loud crack as a huge branch or tree was broken. I am an avid Bigfoot researcher, but just on YouTube. I probably watched thousands of videos over the years, and I've always been fascinated with them. I finally believed them. When this happened, and after remembering what my daughter-in-law had told me about what happened there 3 months earlier, when they were camping there, I knew what caused it. I am a very devout Christian, so I began to pray and ask God to keep them away from the tent. We did have one tiny light on and at night on the picnic table, so if I needed to relieve myself, I'd be able to see. I decided with how dark it was, I was not going to get out of my tent for any reason that night. I went to the bathroom in a container I brought with me. I laid there after the snap, just waiting and listening for any type of sound heading my way. I was literally paralyzed with fear, and I could not stop shaking. I kept praying and praying. About 10 minutes later, I heard another loud crack up from our campsite, maybe 20, 30 feet, I'm guessing. Then another 10, 15 minutes later, another smack about 50 feet down the path, past my son's tent. It took me about 45 minutes to get back to sleep because I was literally terrified. But yet I was able to finally relax and not hear any more sounds. After that night, I made my son put a lantern on a pole above my tent at night because I've always heard that light keeps them away, and it must have worked because I never heard anything else around us the rest of the 6-night stay. I do want to say, though, that 2 days after my experience, a guy had driven in on a motorcycle and stayed at the campsite across the street from ours. It was a tiny site, and he had just had a tent hammock. It's a hammock that has a top over it like a tent. Oh, okay, cool. That's neat. The next day we walked to the top of the path leading to our campsite and yelled down while we were around the campfire and asked us if there was any bears in that campsite area. We said no, not that we know of, and we haven't seen or heard anything. He said around 3:30 in the morning something touched his toes inside his hammock tent. He said it scared him half to death. I can imagine. And that's why I wouldn't want one of them. There's no way I would have been able to get back to sleep had that been me. He told us he was on his way to New Jersey and didn't want to pay for a hotel room, and that's why he stayed in the hammock. He was only there one night. I had a wonderful time the rest of the trip, and my daughter and fiance came up and stayed 2 nights on the weekend before I went home, and we had a wonderful time together. Sadly, my son suffered from depression and anxiety all his life. He lost all his best friends to different things, and his father at a very young age to suicide. His marriage was having problems due to anxiety and usage of alcohol to try and deal with his life. He ended up taking his own life 2 months after my father passed away in May. So sorry to hear that. It has been one heck of a year. Anyway, I'm really enjoying your channel, and I hope you will consider sharing my experience. Please keep my name private because I gave so many details. I'm sure anyone that knows me already knows whose story it is, but I don't need anyone else knowing. God bless, and I hope your channel keeps growing because you are a kind and sensitive soul, I can tell. Sincerely. From Pennsylvania. Did I say the name? I don't think I did. Okay. I don't think I said your name. So, anyway, thank you for sharing that with us. I am so sorry to hear about your son. Why do you guys keep breaking my heart with this stuff? Goodness gracious. We know somebody else that lost their son to suicide here a while back, and it changed her life. It's just such a horrible thing to go through, and it's so sad. And you just can only imagine what he must have been going through. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm glad you got those memories and to go camping, and I'm glad that you did that, because a lot of people might have just declined going at all. So you got to go, you got the experience, and you came out okay from it with something you can talk about. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's kind of interesting, the drifter that passing through there. It makes an interesting spin to the story. All right, so that's it, man. Oh my goodness, I'm caught up for now with those ones, with the older ones. So now I got to get back in here and find out what else we got. Thank you again for joining me and listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. I hope I didn't bug them up too bad. I did my best. And keep sending them in, and I'll keep sharing them. And we'll just keep, growing and learning and getting better as we go, all right? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care, and we'll see you again really soon.